Welcome back. I hope you are ready to continue. The next presenter is representing one of the leading companies in the world, Boston Consulting Group. Mirko has more than 25 years of experience managing transport and logistics sectors. Before joining Boston Consulting Group, he was heading TX Logistics, one of the biggest freight carrier and intermodal logistics operator. And he was also a Divishenko Rail head of operations and member board. We're happy to welcome him here.
Yes, hello everyone, and thanks for the warm welcome. Thanks very much, I really appreciate it. And also thanks for the opportunity to discuss a very challenging and key topic nowadays, which is navigating the future of transport and logistics in a world full of uncertainties and full of military and economic tensions between countries and cultures. And let me use the next 15 minutes to share our latest thinking and perspectives in 3 steps. First of all, I would like to give a short snapshot on the situation globally, also in Europe, based on what we are currently seeing, and also discuss a few scenarios where the world and hence the global trade is heading towards in the next decade. Secondly, I would like to talk about 8 trends shaping the logistic market in the future, which means basically the next decade, and I will end up with a summary, basically what does it all mean also for the Baltics. We heard in the presentations before from Frank and Timur about the disruptions, and certainly the global logistics market is really currently facing severe challenges due to major disruptions, right? We never have been thinking about something like Brexit, COVID, wars, stagflation, and so on. And that certainly impacts the global trade flows. And here are some puzzle pieces and examples what we are currently seeing in Europe. For instance, just to reduce the dependencies of volatility and shocks in supply chain, there's a trend for nearshoring for Eastern Europe, which is, by the way, also a great chance for the Baltics. Massive investments due to this. Brexit still means, hurting UK trade and will lead to the fact there's less volume traded between continental Europe and UK. While Central Europe is stable in terms of growth and capable to capture volumes, and Turkey is basically different because Turkey is on the fence. Meaning they are benefiting from the nearshore trend and also from GDP growth, but there are some political uncertainties and inflation, and that also means risk when it comes to supply chains. When it comes to the Baltics, we see volatility, and of course the Russian trade is continuing to suffering from the sanctions. That's clear. Nobody has a crystal ball, but we think that the Russian trade rebound is uncertain. And that's why we see an imperative for the Baltics to capture more volume from the Nordics, for instance, Finland. Also for Finland, everything is changed overnight. They also have to rearrange all the volumes and flows. But increasingly also from Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and after the war, potentially also from Ukraine. There's another trend I would like to mention here is basically there's a massive investment in hinterland traffic. So all the shipping lines massively investing in gateway structures and strategies and strengthen their intermodal, continental and maritime intermodal connectivity. But this is where is this today, right? I think it's very interesting to look ahead. What's coming? What is in the next decade to come? Because we think these kind of scenarios I will describe in a second helps us to repositioning ourselves, strengthen our strategic thinking about the situation, and also help to build uncertainty advantage, which is certainly needed. So I think one scenario out of 4 is basically back to the future, which means the pre-COVID world, right? Where the inflation was flat, you know, GDP was growing, and all the major powers in the world understood the benefit of cooperation and global exchange. Currently, the dynamic is a bit different, and it's not very likely that we see that scenario, because currently we see certainly the global escalation, where we see a lot of economic and military conflicts in various regions of the world, and also military and economic basically power substitutes the power of institutions and corporations. The third scenario is basically what we call a limited stalemate. So you still have chronic conflicts all over the world in various places. They are unsolved, and this gives certainly kind of a balance, but you are basically stuck in the middle. And the next scenario, the fourth scenario we are thinking about, is basically what we call a tripolar competition, and where you really have the blocks between Western world, the Eastern world, including China and Russia, and third countries, with basically the BRICS countries, Indonesia and GCC countries together. They are looking for alternative ways to basically to find her own ways. And what we are currently seeing, right, even though the momentum currently is global escalation, if we look 10 years ahead, we are convinced that we have something like a tripolar competition where China and Russia improve their logistic ties, right? And the BRICS countries there, you know, try to really find their own way and they increase their importance in the world trade. We translated this tripolar competition scenario and looked into the global trade volumes in 2030. And on this page, you can see the changes in trade of goods in the major corridors in billion US dollars. And I would like to emphasize 5 points, basically. First is the total goods value, trade value is basically increasing with a CAGR of something like 2.3% in 1 decade annually. So this is basically good news. So the overall trade is increasing. From a European perspective, you can clearly see that way less trade between EU and Russia and UK. I mean, that's not a surprise. But EU is basically able to capture this volume with strong ties with the US, massively growing, as well as massively growing in terms of volume to the Asian countries and to Africa. US perspective, close ties to Europe, as I said, but also improved trades to Asian countries and the NAFTA neighboring countries like Mexico and Canada. Interesting, and this is basically the main message here, the intra-Asian volume, trade volume in a decade from now is skyrocketing. So this is where the dynamic is. Unfortunately, far away from us, but this is basically what we see in the numbers. And this is a trade flow between China, Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, and partially Australia and also India. So this is where the dynamics is. And China is basically in the middle of this intra-Asian trade flows, of course, very, very strong position, like also Frank mentioned in the discussion before, but we think that China will somehow relatively lose a little bit of the trade share due to two factors. One is the cost and the wages advantage is deteriorating, it's a little bit reducing. And secondly, there's a high risk of a trade war between China and US, given the economic and political tension between the countries, and that always means high risk for supply chain and enhanced disruptions, and also for investments. And that's why, on the other side, the Asian countries, including India, they're picking up, they're catching up in terms of education, in terms of higher income, higher demand, in terms of population and wages advantages, and so we see a trend of nearshoring from China to Southeast Asia and India. Beyond this perspective, what's going to happening in the next decades, I would like to talk about 8 trends which we think are significant and have a major impact on the global trade and logistics in the next decades. We see some kind of a recovery, right? Back to the new normal, not pre-COVID normal, but the new normal, where the volumes are slightly growing or flattish bit growing, but yields are normalizing and disruption are basically also normalizing. Interestingly, what we are seeing, there's a strong focus on commercial and operational excellence. So also leveraging the decent digital trends. We see a lot of revenue management, personalized pricing, deal benchmarks. So a lot of analytics into dynamics pricing, and also kind of the average of preferability. So basically really looking actively into the portfolio of segments, product, regions. This is what we call cell by cell pricing. I will not repeat everything we understood from Timur's presentation part of sustainability, but we can say sustainability is one of the major drive and forces and source for demand and for development in terms of innovations, costs, and competitiveness in the future. There's a massive expectation from the public, massive investments from governments, also from Europe, right, into the space. And also the clients, B2C and B2B clients, are willing to change to more sustainable modes, right? And this basically shapes the agenda and hence the investments. E-commerce boom. We have seen the rise of e-commerce in the last decades, double-digit numbers, and we see this story is still intact, right? We calculated a 10% CAGR growth for the next decades also for e-commerce, that's clear. Currently, we see some trends around of acceleration of returns, which further supports e-commerce, and also the debundling of the last mile. So the e-commerce boom will basically is intact. Next is digitalization. Of course, this is one of the major levers for cost reduction, high efficiency, but also a new interface to the clients, right? There's definitely an imperative to digitize all the processes, order to cash and procure to pay, just to be in continuously and automated contact with the clients, right? Beyond the operations. And of course, digitalization, and we heard about different trends. I mean, this is basically also the reason where we see electric vehicle, digital automated couplings, hybrid propulsion, and all these innovations come, in the space between sustainability and innovation/digitization. We talked about the shifting global supply chains. I would not repeat this here. Interestingly, 2 points. There's blurring business models and increasing competition. We see IT giants and also startups, but also huge e-commerce platforms. They're attacking the forwarding business. Same, the carriers, they're also, and shipping lines, attacking the forwarding business. So basically, there's really something changing, and the supply chain T&L is disruptive, and everybody is basically trying to get the interface to the client, get as much as close to the client as possible. And that also changes the business model of the carrier, which is basically carrier business is more and more a commodity business. And last point, there's a success story in intermodal transport. There's a growth in intermodal, both maritime and continental intermodal traffic. Interestingly for Europe and also relevant for the Baltics, we see a CAGR of something like 7 to 8% in continental intermodal flows in the next years to come. Quick look into the different verticals. We see air and ocean increasing, so growing, basically due to overcapacity and pricing pressure, a little bit less profitable. Land is increasing due to strong competition, and nearshoring supports this development, especially in emerging countries. Contract logistics is also growing, also profitable, supported by e-commerce, fashion, warehousing. This is still intact. Rail, interestingly, is also increasing, but not so much. I mean, we know that we have a European ambition of 30% market share in 2030. This is what we won't see this, right? We think that in 2030, rail in average in Europe is going to be a rail model share of something like 20.5, 21%, right? Because road is still dominant, but rail is picking up, and especially in terms of capacity, digitization, and technology. Good. I skipped this slide because we had the discussion from Timur about sustainability. Just one thing also regarding rail. Rail is in fact the most sustainable mode of transport, right? This is clear. 80% less energy consumption and 9 times less CO2 carbon emission against other modes, right? And less impact on accidents, land usage, and so on. So the story is intact, right? from the total global gas house emission, rail stands only for 3% of the global gas house emissions, while transport and logistics in total is 16%. So this is a good argument for rail to grow. One of my last slides is here, digitization. You see a lot of trends, and there are certainly much more trends. And if you match the trends with the application areas along the value chain, transport logistics, there are a few trends that are very interesting, right? One is advanced analytics, basically impacting the capabilities of network optimization, but also pricing and demand forecasting. Internet of Things together with connectivity and 5G will basically enable machine-to-machine communication, and also is a fantastic prerequisite to monitor the condition. Artificial intelligence is more for, on the customer side and call centers, but also for dynamic capacity allocation such as timetable and slot allocations and infrastructures, and also a prerequisite for predictive maintenance. And blockchain is certainly important for all the insurance, payment, and lading informations. And of course, I think we had the discussion before, that's why I won't repeat it. There's also a game changer in autonomous driving, autonomous vehicle, which basically increases the competitiveness, especially for road, by a reduction of 50% of the cost structure. I will skip this slide and we'll come to the summary. What does it all mean? I think it's clear that we see a lot of disruptive trends currently and also in the next decades. And it's an imperative to be flexible, to understand these key success factors and the scenarios. The volumes are expected to increase, and the globalization is not over, but it's a bit different because we are changing into something like what we call tripolar competition and order. The driving forces for growth is sustainability and digitization. And for the Baltics, we see positive trends if GDP grows, but there's certainly also, and it's very concrete, you have a marquee project with Rail Baltica. That's a fantastic chance to connect physically, but also digitally with the rest of Europe. And I think this is a fantastic chance, and you need to join forces, and you really use Rail Baltica project to capture the value out of this new infrastructure. So with that, I say thank you for the attention, and happy to answer any questions in the panel discussion or Q&A session. Thank you very much.